remember, in order to get this opportunity, he's had to be in jail and be all cynical and angry and railing at God. Why do I have to do this? And, why do I say that? Because I do it for much less. For much less, I gripe. My day gets interrupted and I get mad. And I'm like, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? And why do you put these people? Why do they disagree with me? And why do I have to have parent conferences? And why do I have to, all these things that I gripe about. But yeah, Paul, make sure you got your A game going, buddy. Go in there and win them. God brings together whom he wants. Now, how many of these came to accept the gospel? It doesn't say. It doesn't say. It doesn't say at the end of this chapter, and a bunch of these guys came to know the Lord. It doesn't say that. Maybe none of them. Maybe some offering life. Or we'll go into it. Okay. If we don't get to do that, there's no if. When he says do this, we do it. Next. There's no if. There's not if I get what I want, if I get to see the fruit of the labor. No, we do it. Done. And we trust the rest with him. The neat thing is, though, we can trust God's at work. We can trust God is at work here, and he is. Now, let's make sure we understand as we go to our next slide. It's not sliding. There we go. Thank you. So in Matthew chapter 10, verses 16 through 18, Jesus says, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard, for you will be handed over to local councils and flogged in synagogues, and on my account you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. Jesus says this to his believers. Paul's getting to do it. Getting to. Okay, now I want to go back to the first sentence here. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Have you ever thought about that? I'm sending you out like a sheep among the wolves. If I could, that's one of those where I want to go, hey, God, could you send me out like a ravenous bear among wolves? Could you send me out as, I don't know, some huge animal that wolves can't hurt? That would devour a wolf, right? I'm like, God, no, God. I appreciate that you're God and everything, but can we redo that sentence? I don't really like how that works. I know you didn't mean to say you were sending us. You meant that we're like wolves and they're like sheep. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen a sheep tear up a wolf. I've never seen one. I hadn't seen that would be on... Not that I would see a TikTok, but that and, that kind of stuff. That would be on the social media. Watch this sheep. Good gosh almighty. It smokes this wolf right here. No, I've never seen one of those. And yet I'm always going, God, what in the world? You're letting them have the edge on us. You're letting them defeat us. You're letting them, why? Like this is something new. He says, well, I told you I was going to send you out like a sheep in the middle of a bunch of wolves. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And he did that on purpose. And you think, why did he do that? Because we have to depend on him. We have to depend on him. Because if he sent me out like a bear, I'd just run out and crush everybody. Showing everybody how strong I am, showing us how, oh, I don't like you. Oh, you want to argue with me? Okay. And we think it's all about us. Instead, he sends us out there and we're going, oh, dang. Ooh. God, this isn't fair. I don't like this scenario here. And he goes, you better keep your eyes on me, buddy. I got you. But you better keep your eyes on me. He stuck Daniel in the middle of a lion's den. And he said, I got you. I got you. I'll keep their mouths closed. You know, we can read that and go, man, yeah, that'd be cool. Really? No, it wouldn't. Not till after I was out and they were dead and all that. You know, there'd been nothing cool about it till after it was all over. I bet Daniel prayed. Oh, my gosh, I bet he prayed. I bet he wasn't over there nodding off. He was praying. Got to think that lion's licking his lips right now. You know, you're watching every move. You know, that Paul moved a little bit. Ugh! I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves. We're like, I don't even know what that means. What do you mean I'm supposed to be shrewd as a snake and innocent as a dove? I don't know how to do that. And he goes, yeah, better keep your eyes on me. Be on your guard. Okay, I'm on my guard. That's how we come to church. You know, on my guard. I don't think that's what he's talking about. He's talking about in the spiritual realm. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and flogged in the synagogues. So the being on our guard is an understanding that things that we don't like are going to happen. Sleep and go, wait a minute. This can't be God. On my account, this will happen. You will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. He didn't say you'll be brought before them so that all of them will be saved. He says you'll be a witness. You'll be a witness. That's what we're responsible for. That's all. Okay, so we move to the next slide, which is verse 23. So in 23, it says at the command of Festus, Paul is brought in. Okay? So Festus is like, bring in the prisoner. Okay? So here he comes in, and you got everybody sitting around, and they're all judging him and looking down on him and so forth. And I don't know if you've been in a scenario like this. I don't know if you've been in a place where you're kind of just there and everyone else is looking down on you. I don't necessarily mean in height, positionally, maybe so, but where they're looking down on you. You're vulnerable. It's kind of like a sheep among wolves. Yeah, that's kind of what it's like. You're vulnerable. And that's where he is right there. In 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 9, I brought this up a week or so ago, and Paul writes, for it seems to me that God has put us apostles on display at the end of the procession like those condemned to die in the arena. We have been made a spectacle to the whole universe, to angels as well as to human beings. He's speaking about the vulnerability that God allows. I promise you, he's not writing that and going, man, I love that. No, he's recognizing it. That's not a fun place to be. Like, you're on display at the end of the procession like those condemned to die in the arena. You know, those Christians that got put out there and then they opened up the gates and the lions came out and ate them. That's what he feels like. Yeah. Vulnerable. That's what it feels like. And it's not just people not liking you. It's not just people and bow up and go, well, you know what? I don't really care what they think. You know, we've all tried all that. And we do all that. We're talking about something spiritual. And when it is a spiritual thing, oh, it's way different. And you feel it. And it's heavy. And you feel like you're going to be crushed. That's how you feel. And that's what he's describing like there. It's like being in the arena and I'm about to be eaten. That's how I feel. That's what God is allowing to have happen in my life. So we go back to verses 23 and 24. And Festus says, King Agrippa, he turns to Agrippa, and he says, and all who are present here with us, you see this man. The whole there, I said, okay, let's see a show of hands. Who has accepted Jesus in their life? And you coming out. And you coming out. Why? Because it's not just people coming out. Why? Because it's not just people. You're talking about something spiritual going on. You're talking about that. You're talking about something spiritual going on. You're talking about that same spirit that was moving in Herod the Great that wanted to kill, that was moving in Herod the Great that wanted to kill Jesus. That same spirit after him. That same spirit after him. And these people are open vessels and they're allowing that sick spirit. Now, we've spent some time talking about Festus, and earlier in the chapter, Festus, he spends about a couple of weeks with the Jews, and he's schmoozing with them, and he's siding up with them, and, trying to make sure his rule in Caesarea goes well, and so he's connecting in Caesarea goes well, and so he's connecting with them, and they're saying, this is what we want. We want this guy Paul, and we want him dead. And he's like, okay, well, I can't get outside the law, so come down to Caesarea, and we'll listen to what he has to say. And so they come down and they start yelling, and we'll listen to what he has to say. And so they come down and they start yelling and screaming, and he's like, and he's in charge, and he's trying to figure out what to do. I know he's not guilty. I sure know he's not supposed to die. These guys over here want him dead. I'm trying to make sure I keep on their good side. He says here, I found he has nothing deserving of death. There's nothing. And he has nothing deserving of death. There's nothing. But he's made his appeal to Caesar. So basically, you know what he's doing? He's doing like Pilate, and he's watching his hands, and he's going, yeah, it's not on me. It's not on me. I'm passing the buck. Hey, King Agrippa and Bernice, I'm going to let y'all hear this and see what y'all think. He's passing the buck, basically. C.S. Lewis, he writes in The Problem of Pain, he says, for you will certainly carry out God's purpose. You being anyone who is alive. You will certainly carry out God's purpose, however you act. Whatever you do, you're going to carry out God's purpose. But it makes a difference whether you serve like Judas or like John. Judas carried out God's plan because God said his son was going to go to the cross and die for mankind. And Judas was a part of that. That's a tough part to play. There's a high cost in eternity. Or we can be like John and do what God says and be a part of that plan. We all get a choice. And Festus, he gets a choice, and he thinks he's just bowing out, but he'll stand before God for his part in this and the injustices that are going on right now. Everyone will stand before God at some time or another. So back to our text. So we're back to Festus, and he says, but I have nothing definite to write His Majesty about him. That ought to be a pretty good clue. Yeah, there's probably nothing to Rome without specifying the charges against him. Yeah, no kidding? No, they couldn't really figure out anything. Then why is it on the docket? Okay, so this is where Festus is, all right? But he says here, the other thing, King Agrippa's Jewish. He's a Jew. Remember, he's the sister of Drusilla, who was a Jew, and the sister of Bernice, who was a Jew, and the great-great-grandson of Herod, who was a Jew. They had just sided up with Rome in order to have power because they had allowed the enemy to come into their hearts. So when you're talking about he's Festus, he's no Jew. He's from Rome. He's a Roman citizen, and he's like, okay, King Agrippa, I'm asking you, what do we do about all this? Because I don't know about this dead guy that this man the Jews are saying is dead, and Paul says he's alive. His name's Jesus, and I don't know. What do you think? It's on Agrippa now. Now, up front and center. Okay? So it says, then King Agrippa says to Paul, you have permission to speak for yourself. Okay? So that's where we are at that point. He has now given him the chance. Now is Paul's opportunity. Now is his opportunity to speak. And he does. And so as we move on into chapter 26 and verse 1, it says, Paul motioned with his hand to begin his defense. And I don't know what motion he did, but he gave some motion, like, raising his hand or something. And in verse 2 it says, King Agrippa. So he calls him by name. King Agrippa, I consider myself fortunate to stand before you today. All right, now stop a second and think about that. I consider myself fortunate to stand before you today. Remember what I talked about a little while ago at the first? I wouldn't be considering myself fortunate to have to talk before this king and tell him why I shouldn't be released from prison and that it's not fair that I've sat in prison for 2 years for no reason just because the last guy, Felix, was trying to do everybody a favor, and now this new guy, Festus, he won't set me free because he's trying to get money and all that kind of stuff. And so we have all this going on, and I'd be ticked. I'd be like, I tell you what, Agrippa, y'all need to get your stuff together, or whatever the case may be. But no, Paul says, I consider myself fortunate to stand before you today. Now, we can sit in our chair and we can go, yeah, I could probably get there. I could I think it through. I trust that God's doing something. And can you and I, right for doing nothing wrong? And he says, I'm fortunate to be here. I'm thankful because I'm trusting that God's in charge and he has a purpose. And I don't know what it is. Us, we'd be going, well, maybe Agrippa's going to get saved today. I trust that you're in charge. And so I'm going to declare I'm fortunate to be right where I am today. And he says, as I make my defense against all the accusations of the Jews, and especially so because you are well acquainted with all the Jewish customs and controversies. Why is that? Because he's Jewish. He's very familiar with all the Jews' customs and controversies. He knows what's going on. Therefore, I beg you to listen to me patiently. So we move back to what Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 10, what I brought up earlier, verses 19 and 20. He says, but when they arrest you, he didn't say if, he said when. When they arrest you, don't worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Paul, right now, if he is taking a hold of what God is doing, which he is, because he just got through saying he was fortunate to be in that position, and he is trusting that God is moving, then he is confident that God is giving him the words to say right in this moment. Right now. And here's something else. So can you. When we begin to receive the understanding that God has put us in these places that are difficult. We can be confident in Him to help us say what needs to be said. As I was telling you, about coming in today, and my body's tired, all that kind of stuff, all the stuff of the world. I got nothing to offer you. I can go, yeah, did you have a rough week? You can go, yeah. I go, yeah, me too. Y'all have a great week. Hope it goes well. We're all in the same boat. World's going to hell. Have a great one. We'd all gone home a lot earlier. All right? Capture you with, I don't even know. I have no idea. But I don't have to worry about all that because He's in charge of it. And it is His word that's going to quicken your spirit. It is His word that's going to change you. It's going to change how you think. It's going to change how your heart is. And so, when you go out of here today, and we have things that happen and thought processes come up of just what we normally do, and He goes, no. Remember, I'm talking to you now. No, trust me. Do this. And you're like, okay. And you start doing that, oh, it's different. Yeah, it's different. Then you begin to live. We quit walking in death. That everything gets rosy and we skip through the tulips and all that kind of stuff. It's not that. He doesn't offer that. He doesn't promise that. He says, I will be with you. I will be with you. Do we get that? God's with me. I really believe that. He's with me. Tend to make this some kind of distant thing, and we're betraying Him. You talk about vulnerable. When the people that you count on, they all know. They watched me. Verse 5, they have known me for a long time and can testify, if they're willing, that I conform to the strictest sect of our religion, living as a Pharisee. If they will be honest, they would have to go, well, that's true. That's who he was as Saul. And they all loved him at that time, by the way. Moving on, verse 6 and 7. And now, okay, he's talking to Agrippa. Now, it's because of my hope in what God has promised. You see, the Jews in all this upbringing and all the teaching and all that he's just talking about, there's the hope of the Messiah. There's the hope of the Savior. They all have that just like he does. It's just now he's saying, I've met him. I met him. This isn't some new thing that we're talking about. This isn't some made up. So we get to 7 and 8. And now it gets real for Agrippa. All the thought was I nodding off, or was I was being attentive. Why are you calling me? Is everybody looking at me now? His name gets called King Agrippa. And now, it's not just Paul. God says that he will give him the words, and he will tell him how to do it. And so now God is calling him out, King Agrippa. And now, God's Spirit is all over this guy, whether he likes it or not. Right now, I'm betting he does. It is because of this hope that these Jews are accusing me. Why should any of you consider it incredible that God raises the dead? You're a Jew. You believe all of what's in the Old Testament. Parting of the Red Sea, Jonah and the fish, manna from heaven, on and on. What do you mean? You're worried about whether or not God can raise a guy from the dead? Sure he can. You don't believe in Elijah and the chariots and the fire and all that? Well, if he didn't, he wouldn't. He'd be going, yeah, I'd betray who I am and my religion. So he's got him dead to rights. He's got him stuck in front of all these people. King Agrippa, how can you consider it incredible that God can raise from the dead? I bet he felt like he had a volleyball in his throat as he's being called out. You know, I can't help as we see this, I can't help but think of Philippians 2:10 and 11. Where it says that at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, and things in heaven and on, things in earth and things under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord to the glory of God the Father. Every human computer to go, there we go. All right. So, we're back to verse 9 through 11, Paul's testimony. And he continues on. He's telling him his story. He says, I too was convinced that I ought to do all that was possible to oppose the name of Jesus of Nazareth. That was me. The thing that these people are doing to me, I was doing. That was my story. Verse 10, and that is just what I did in Jerusalem. On the authority of the chief priests, I put many of the Lord's people in prison, and when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. You know, I think we recognize Paul was there at Stephen's stoning. You know, it says, and they laid their clothes at a young man named Saul, excuse me. But he says here, as they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. He was a part of many murders. He was on that side. That side that hated. That side that didn't get it. The side that didn't know the truth. He says in verse 11, many a time I went from synagogue to another, one synagogue to another, to have them punished. I tried to force them to blaspheme. I was so obsessed with persecuting them that I even hunted them down in foreign cities. There's a hatred that comes from the enemy that's beyond just what you normally do. And he was caught up in that. He says in verse 12, on one of these journeys, now here comes the good part, as he tells King Agrippa his testimony. On one of these journeys, I was going to Damascus with the authority and the commission of the chiefs, and about noon, King Agrippa, and he probably saw him kind of looking up. Eyes right here, buddy. Don't wander. I'm talking to you. God's Spirit is speaking to you. Don't miss this, King Agrippa. About noon, King Agrippa, I was on the road and I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me and my companions, and we all fell to the ground. And I heard a voice say to me in Aramaic, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Now, I don't know about you. That may be one of those sentences you go, kicking against the goads. Yeah, I don't know what that means. And then you go on. You know, whatever I do today, I am not kicking goads. Not doing it. By gosh, that's going to be my resolution for the next year. As soon as I find out what a goad is, I ain't kicking it. All right? So, we are going to figure out what goad kicking is. All right? Let's get out of line. It's hard for you. You're making it hard on yourself. We can see it in others, can't we? Man, that guy, he's like the preacher said. Can't we? Man, that guy, he's like the preacher said. He's kicking against the goads. He's kicking against the goads, you know. But then there's that part where why do you kick against the goads? Why are you fighting me? Fighting me. And he says, who are you? Who are you? You say I'm fighting against you. I don't even know who you are. Who are you? And Jesus says, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. You see, he met him. He met him. He met him. it changes him. It changes everything. It's not about going, he didn't say, why are you, kicking against the goats? And he says, who are you? And he goes, well, make sure you're at church at 10:30 on Sunday. He didn't say, make sure you give alms to the poor. He didn't say, go be a good humanitarian. Go do, none of that stuff. He met him. Now, when we meet him, there's something that happens, and he changes our behavior. He changes us. And we should look different from when we were over here. There should be a difference. If there isn't, probably hadn't met him. You may have been introduced to him, but you don't know him and have experienced him. Now I'm calling you into my work. And you're going to live for me. And that's what he did with Paul. Saul in this case. He hadn't changed his name yet. So look at what he says to him in 16 through 18. He says, now get up and stand on your feet. I mean, I can just hear my dad, get up, boy. I mean, my dad said that to me a bunch. I'd be down there pouting or crying. Or remember that stuff when you're crying, you're like, and he'd go, you better cut that out. I mean, that was no good in our house. I mean, I'd be turning purple, trying not to breathe, because that was enough. Get up, boy. We weren't playing any longer. Now get up and stand on your feet. I bet his knees were knocking. Because he just met the one who created everything, who spoke it all into being, and he's meeting him. And we see all that we are in light of him, and it's humbling. And we feel so small, because quite frankly, we really are. And he says, stand up on your feet. Yes, sir. And he says, I have appeared to you to appoint you a servant and as a witness of what you have seen and will see of me. I'm betting there were a few questions going through his head right now at that time. And what am I going to do, and what am I going to, and how's that, and all that. Yeah, all those things. Verse 17, I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. That's another one you'd like to go, now, what exactly does that mean? He didn't need to know. He was on a need-to-know basis right now. These things are going to happen, I'm telling you, before they ever happen. But I'm going to rescue you. And then he says, I'm sending you to them. I'm sending you to them. To open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan that he had been ruled by, as he's putting these people to death, to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified. Whoever them is that he's sending you to open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God. Now what happens is we can get all excited, or we can go, God, I want to do that, and it's Sunday, and I want to do that. Help me this week. And then I sleep, and it's like I have amnesia on Monday. And I just go back to being the way I've been. And it is there that we have to call out to him. We have to say, Lord, help me keep my eyes on you. Help me to have my heart before you. Do your work in me. Help me remember what you've done for me, so that I can have eyes and a heart for those who are in darkness. And I can have an eyes and heart for those who the power of Satan has, and they're not in your kingdom yet. Show me. Give me a passion for them, and what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And it's amazing. It's amazing how he does it. And here he is. Now, he's been put in a very uncomfortable, difficult place. Because there are people that God wants this message to go to, and he's speaking to an audience that wants anything to do with what he's sharing. But he's being obedient, and he's sharing it. In 1 Timothy 2, verse 4, it says, God, who desires all men to be saved and come to the full knowledge of the truth. This is so powerful. There are people in our lives that we go, yeah, well, I don't know. They're probably a little too far. No. 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 If they're breathing, they got a shot. They got a shot. It's not for us to decide where they are on the scale. It's not for us to decide how bad or whatever. They would have done that for Paul. Yeah, he's too bad. He goes around killing Christians. And who did God choose? Him. There is no one that God does not want. And we have to remember that. And sometimes we have to ask God to help us see certain individuals that he puts us around that drive us nuts. More of it, that's on me. Or on me. Recommended this one to me. I loved it. It's called Jesus Was an Airborne Ranger. And this guy recommended this one to me. I loved it. It's called Jesus Was an Airborne Ranger. And this guy was an airborne ranger. So, he's kind of partial. Was an airborne ranger. So, he's kind of partial. But his whole point in the book is that Jesus isn't a wimp and he's not. You must fight like Jesus did. You have been dropped into enemy territory for a mission. Is that how you see where you are right now? You've been dropped behind enemy lines on a mission. On a mission. And your family, your community, and your world are counting on you. And your world are counting on you. You have our marching orders to be obedient even when it was really, really hard. It was really, really hard. Paul's ability to keep his eyes on you, Jesus, to truly count it all a blessing. Even though, Father, here's where the rubber hits the road. We can recognize all that in Paul. We can get the depth of what he did, and how you were working in him, and still allow there to be a disconnect between what you wrote down for us and our lives. And I pray this morning, Lord, that you'll help us get it. That we've been dropped behind enemy lines. And you have a mission for each of us to be a part of. I pray that you help us to see it. Let us have new eyes that your Spirit gives us. May